Of course, crying alone in a coffee shop at 3 p.m. makes total sense. Doesn't it? I muttered under my breath, wiping at the rim of my coffee cup with a trembling sleeve. I knew no one was supposed to witness my unraveling. Yet somehow, my heart didn't entirely resent the quiet space around me. The first time it happened, I had been mourning the kind of heartbreak that people don't write songs about. The kind that lingers in the corners of your apartment, spills into your hoodie, and insists on showing up when you least expect it. That day, I didn't notice the small envelope tucked under my coffee cup until I reached for the napkin. A sticky note, with my name scrawled in a neat, unfamiliar hand. You're stronger than you think. Coffee's on me tomorrow if you need a friend. I hadn't looked up. I hadn't asked who left it. But the words, simple, almost painfully sincere, made my chest tighten in a way I wasn't ready to understand. Days bled into weeks. Each tearful visit to the same corner. Every sigh, every hurried scribble in my journal seemed to be met with a small act of kindness. A chocolate bar left beside my notebook, a packet of tea, sometimes a sketch on a napkin, never with a signature, never with explanation. The mystery kept me on edge, and my own curiosity and anxiety tangled in ways that made ordinary life feel impossible. The cafe had become my sanctuary, and yet, in some secret corner of my mind, I was haunted by the idea that someone was silently watching my sorrow, that someone understood it better than I dared to. Then there was him. I first noticed him weeks after the initial note, standing by the window with a faint rain-streaked glare. His hands wrapped around a mug, the sleeve of his coat pushed back just enough to reveal a tattoo curling around his wrist. He wasn't particularly handsome in a magazine kind of way, but there was a gravity about him, a quiet intensity that made the air feel thick when he was near. I had caught him looking once, twice, thrice, and each time he retreated, as if aware that his presence alone was disruptive to the fragile bubble of my sorrow. The truth was, I had been falling for a ghost. For the warmth left behind by a series of notes and gifts, for the idea of someone who saw me, really saw me in my weakest state and didn't flinch. The idea of meeting him in person was terrifying. And yet, the thought of never knowing who he was felt unbearable. It was the kind of thing that should have seemed absurd. Trembling over a paper envelope, holding back tears in a crowded cafe while the world outside hurried by in a rain-streaked blur. Yet, absurd as it was, the intensity of it grounded me. And then came the day I finally saw the note for what it was: not just words, not just paper, but a bridge. Meet me tomorrow, it read, simple as daylight, in that same precise handwriting. My stomach flipped. I reread it a dozen times, each reading a little louder in my mind. Meet me tomorrow. Tomorrow. Couldn't sleep that night. Not because I was anxious about the meeting itself, but because every scenario played in my head. Every imagined version of him, from kind and shy to bold and confident, set my pulse racing and my chest tightening in equal measure. The next day, the cafe seemed larger, emptier somehow, though it was bustling. The smell of coffee beans and pastry warmed the air, but I barely noticed it. My eyes scanned every corner, every table, and then I saw him exactly as I had pictured, though perhaps even more vivid. He stood near the counter, casually leaning on the edge, holding something wrapped carefully in brown paper. He looked calm, impossibly calm, as if he knew the storm inside me. When his eyes met mine, there was no hesitation, only a quiet recognition. And then he smiled, just slightly, but enough to make my heart do something dangerous. "Hey," he said softly, his voice threading through the hum of the cafe like a warm breeze. "You got my notes." I nodded, words failing me. "I wasn't sure if you'd come," he admitted, stepping closer. There was a careful deliberation in his movements, a rhythm that seemed meant to reassure me, though my nerves were tangled beyond comprehension. "I had to," I whispered. The words felt laughably small compared to the pounding in my chest. He placed the small package on the table. My fingers brushed against his just slightly, an accidental touch that sparked a jolt through me. "Open it," he said. Inside was a hand-bound notebook, blank except for the first page, where he had written, "For your thoughts, your dreams, and the tears you don't want anyone else to see. But if you ever need me, I'll be here. Couldn't look up. My vision blurred, and I realized then that all the tears I had tried to hide, all the lonely afternoons, had been leading to this moment. He waited, quietly, letting me absorb it, letting the silence do the work of words neither of us yet had. "Two don't even know your name," I admitted, my voice shaking like wind through autumn leaves. "Call me Sam," he said, his eyes softening. "And you, Eli?" I murmured, feeling the weight of the name as if it were a secret shared for the first time in the world. For a long moment, we just looked at each other, two strangers who had crossed invisible lines through notes and small gifts, through shared vulnerability, through unspoken understanding. The cafe around us blurred into a backdrop, the rain tapping lightly on the window like a gentle applause. "You're not alone anymore," Sam said finally, a gentle certainty in his tone that grounded the storm inside me. "I've been waiting to see you like this." I laughed nervously, tears still threatening to fall. "You really have been stalking me, haven't you?" He chuckled, a sound that made the world feel suddenly lighter, almost safe. "If that counts as stalking, then yes, guilty as charged. But only because I care." The words hung between us, delicate and fragile, yet heavier than anything I had ever known. There was a tenderness in his gaze that melted something frozen in me for years, a reminder that even in pain, even in secrecy, connection could be found. And as I finally looked him fully in the eye, not as a figure in a dream or a ghost in my memory, but as a person real and present, I realized something profound. For the first time, I felt seen. Not just for my sorrow, not just for my tears, but for who I was beneath it all. The world outside continued in its rush, indifferent to the tiny miracle happening inside a quiet coffee shop. But for Eli and Sam, time seemed to stretch, elastic and forgiving, around the warmth that bloomed between them. He reached out, gently brushing a wet strand of hair from my face. My heart leapt at the contact, fragile and insistent. "I've been hoping for this," he whispered, almost shy, though his eyes betrayed a depth of feeling that made my knees weak. "Me too," I admitted, words finally catching up with the torrent inside me. And in that simple exchange, amidst the hum of conversation, the clatter of coffee cups, and the soft rhythm of rain, something extraordinary happened. Two hearts, broken in their own ways, began to heal together. The meeting was nothing like I imagined. It was better, honest, tentative, filled with the kind of quiet intensity that doesn't need grand gestures to announce its presence. Just the small, patient acts of care that had brought us here: notes, chocolates, sketches, a willingness to wait for someone to be ready. As we sat there, side by side for the first time, the weight of weeks of anticipation lifted just enough to let something new take root. Something tender, something human, something dangerously beautiful. And in that moment, I knew with a clarity that left no room for doubt. Some connections are meant to be found not through grand declarations, but through persistence, kindness, and the courage to show up even when it's terrifying. The next days were a whirlwind of emotion, a mix of excitement and terror that clung to me like a second skin. Every morning, I would find myself reaching for my phone, half expecting a note, half hoping for nothing at all, afraid that the spell might shatter if I looked too eager. Sam, as I had learned, was meticulous, patient, and quietly bold. He didn't push, but he didn't wait in the shadows either. Each gesture, each small gift, each note, seemed to thread a delicate line between care and desire, leaving me teetering on the edge of longing I had never allowed myself to feel before. Our first real date, if one could call it that, wasn't fancy. He suggested we walk through an old part of the city, the cobblestone streets of a neighborhood that felt like it belonged in a sepia photograph. The rain had stopped, leaving the air crisp and the world gleaming under a soft, forgiving light. "I hope this isn't too much," Sam said, adjusting his scarf as he fell into step beside me. His voice had a nervous cadence I hadn't noticed before, and it made me smile. "You're walking too fast," I said teasingly, and he slowed, matching my pace. The city felt unusually intimate, the kind of intimacy that makes strangers seem like characters in a story meant just for you. We wandered past cafes and little bookstores, through streets lined with lampposts that cast pools of golden light, the kind that makes you feel like you're inside a memory. I noticed everything about him, the way his eyes caught the light, the tilt of his head when he laughed, the subtle tension in his shoulders that hinted at a life lived with caution. And I felt, in every fiber of my being, that I wanted to know it all, to touch it all, to be part of it. But reality was relentless. Not the rain, not the city, but the world outside, with its sharp edges and loud judgments. I had spent my life hiding, shrinking, bending myself into forms that wouldn't invite scrutiny or gossip. Loving someone like Sam openly was a risk I wasn't sure I was ready for. One afternoon, the weight of that fear became impossible to ignore. We had been sitting on a park bench after a long walk, watching children chase pigeons and dogs tug at their leashes. The sky a clear blue with the occasional lazy cloud. "Do you ever worry?" I asked, voice barely above the whisper of wind through the trees. "About people finding out about us?" Sam's expression softened. He reached over, brushing a stray leaf from my hair, and for a heartbeat, I felt like the world could stop entirely and nothing else would matter. "I do," he admitted, "but not as much as I worry about losing what we have because of fear. You're worth facing the world for, Eli." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to hold onto that certainty. But the reality of judgment, the whispered conversations and pointed stares that could come from coworkers, classmates, even friends weighed heavily on me. And then there were the moments of self-doubt nights I lay awake, wondering if this was just a fleeting connection, a temporary reprieve from loneliness that would vanish if I dared to trust it fully. But Sam had a way of grounding me, not with grand gestures but with presence. The way he listened, really listened, to every trivial detail I offered. The way he remembered what I liked, what I feared, what made me laugh. Each act, each small reminder of his care, built a bridge I was terrified yet desperate to cross. Our relationship grew quietly, deliberately, a slow-burning thing that didn't need declarations or announcements. We found refuge in corners of the city that felt safe, in cafes where the barista smiled knowingly when we sat together, in long walks where hands brushed until they held, tentative yet unwavering. Then came the first real challenge. It was a Sunday afternoon when the news came. Though it wasn't really news, it was a reminder of the world outside our carefully curated bubble. A social media post from someone I thought I could trust, a friend who had seen us walking together, laughing in a park, and felt compelled to comment. The words stung, though they were tame compared to the worst I had imagined. "Interesting choice of company. Didn't know you were into that." I stared at the screen, feeling a rush of shame, anger, and fear. Part of me wanted to disappear, to erase all traces of Sam from my life, to retreat into the safety of invisibility. But another part, the part that had been alive since the first note, since the first chocolate bar left on my table, refused to run. Sam noticed my silence immediately. His hand found mine, firm and warm. "What happened?" he asked gently. I showed him the post. His eyes darkened, not with anger, but with a kind of protective concern that made my heart ache. "People can be cruel," he said, voice steady. "But you know what? Their cruelty doesn't define us. It defines them." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to let go of the fear that gnawed at my stomach. But it wasn't easy. The whispers of doubt, the sting of judgment, the instinct to hide it was all still there. We spent the afternoon in silence, walking through the familiar streets that had once felt like a sanctuary. Sam didn't pressure me to respond, didn't ask me to post anything or explain ourselves. He simply walked beside me, a steady presence, a reminder that we were not alone. It was during that walk that I realized something profound. Love wasn't about perfection, or absence of fear, or immunity to judgment. Love was about showing up, even when the world was cruel, even when your own mind was a battleground. And so I showed up. The next week, we made our first small stand together, not a protest, not a confrontation, just a deliberate act of visibility. We attended a local art exhibit, hand in hand, letting our presence be seen without apology. The world didn't shatter, the sky didn't fall, and yet it felt revolutionary. People stared, of course. Some whispered, but the weight of their judgment was lighter than I expected. Sam's hand in mine, the warmth of his presence, made it almost bearable, even empowering. Afterward, we walked along the river, the lights of the city shimmering on the water. I laughed a genuine, unguarded laugh for the first time in months. "You're incredible," Sam said softly, brushing a damp strand of hair from my face. "Do you know that?" "I'm not sure I am," I admitted, leaning into him. "But I'm trying." "That's enough," he said, and in that moment, I understood something I had always feared. Love didn't have to be perfect to be real. It just had to be persistent, patient, and courageous. And we were both learning to be courageous. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of public visibility and private intimacy. We learned the rhythms of each other's fears, the silent language of gestures and glances, the unspoken promise that neither of us would let the other face the world alone. There were moments of doubt, moments of pain, moments when the weight of societal expectation threatened to undo everything. But there were also moments of triumph, small victories, like holding hands in public without flinching, or laughing together in a crowded cafe, or leaving a note for the other without words, simply a shared glance and a smile. And through it all, the city became a backdrop for our unfolding story, a city that could be harsh and judgmental, yes, but also beautiful, forgiving, full of light if we chose to see it. One evening, as autumn began to tinge the leaves with gold and red, Sam and I found ourselves back at the coffee shop where it had all begun. The place was quiet, almost empty, the aroma of coffee beans and pastries filling the air. "I can't believe it started here," I said, glancing around the room, memories flooding back like an unstoppable tide. "Neither can I," Sam admitted, sliding into the seat across from me. He placed a small package on the table, identical in size to the ones he had left before, though now it felt different, full of intention, not mystery. I opened it to find a carefully bound scrapbook, filled with sketches, notes, and photographs of the moments we had shared, the walks, the cafe visits, the quiet evenings, the small acts of rebellion against fear and judgment. "I wanted you to see how far we've come," Sam said, his voice soft but certain. "Not just the happy parts, but everything. Every moment you let me in, every tear, every laugh. It's all here." I felt my chest tighten, tears threatening to spill despite my best efforts. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "You're beautiful." He smiled, reaching across the table to take my hand. "So are you. And you know what? I'm not done showing you yet. There's a lifetime ahead of us, Eli. A lifetime of notes, walks, laughter, love." And in that moment, I knew he was right. Love was messy, complicated, terrifying, and beautiful. It was the courage to face the world together, the willingness to be vulnerable, and the quiet insistence that we would not let fear dictate our lives. I squeezed his hand, letting the warmth and certainty of his presence wash over me. "Then let's keep going," I said. "Always," he replied, and the word hung between us like a promise, steady and unbreakable. Outside, the city continued in its rush, the streets bustling, the lights flickering against the early evening sky. But inside that coffee shop, amidst the quiet hum of life, two hearts beat in unison, ready to face whatever the world had to offer together. It was the beginning of something enduring, something real, something that no whispered judgment, no cruel comment, no lingering fear could ever undo. Because sometimes, love wasn't about grand declarations or dramatic moments. It was about showing up over and over again, for the person who had quietly watched you cry, for the one who had left notes and gifts not for glory, but for connection. And now, facing Sam directly, fully and without hesitation, I understood the truth of it. We had already crossed the bridge from loneliness to belonging. The rest of the world could wait. The weeks that followed were a mixture of quiet triumphs and subtle anxieties. Sam and I had learned to navigate the delicate line between our private sanctuary and the public world that wasn't always kind to people like us. But each challenge made our connection deeper, more resilient. One rainy evening, as the sky darkened earlier than usual, we found ourselves walking along the city streets, puddles reflecting neon signs and the occasional passing car. The air smelled faintly of wet asphalt and roasted coffee, a combination that somehow felt like home when I was with him. I never thought I'd be able to hold your hand in public without my chest racing, I admitted, squeezing his fingers gently. He laughed, a warm, musical sound that eased the tension coiling inside me. And yet, here we are, together, surviving the world one small step at a time. We paused under the awning of a closed bookstore, the rain pattering softly above us. My heart was hammering in a way I couldn't quite explain. There was something in his gaze tonight, something different, determined, unafraid, and undeniably tender. Eli, he began, his voice low, do you know how much you've changed me? I tilted my head, unsure how to respond. Changed you? Yes, he said, taking both my hands in his. You've taught me to hope again, to trust, to feel something real. And I can't imagine my life without you in it. The words struck me with the force of truth. My throat tightened, and I realized I had been holding back tears, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of finally being seen, finally being loved without reservation. I feel the same, I whispered, letting the confession slip out like a secret finally freed. He smiled, leaning closer until our foreheads touched. The world around uskers, pedestrians, flickering streetlights faded into a blur. In that space, there was only us, fragile and bold, trembling yet steady. I've been thinking about the next step, he murmured, voice thick with emotion. Not just us, but showing the world we belong together, fully, openly. No more hiding. My heart lurched. The thought had terrified me before, but now, with him by my side, it felt like the natural next step. We had already endured so much silently, so many small acts of bravery, and yet this felt monumental. I'm ready, I said, surprising even myself. I want to do it. With you. His eyes softened, brimming with a tenderness I could barely hold. Then we do it together. Whatever comes, we face it together. We planned our small declaration carefully, not a protest, not a performance, just a moment of courage and visibility. We chose the cafe where our story had begun, the place that had witnessed my tears, his notes, our first tentative meeting. Saturday morning arrived, the city bustling as usual. The cafe was warm and inviting, and we stepped in hand. It was a quiet act, but to us it felt revolutionary. Patrons glanced briefly, some smiles, some whispers, but no one interfered. For the first time, I felt an unspoken solidarity, a sense that our connection, fragile yet unshakable, was enough to claim our space in the world. Sam pulled me aside to our usual corner, setting down a small envelope. One last note, he said, his lips quirking into a smile. I opened it to find a handwritten card. Eli, we survived fear, doubt, and the world's judgment. Now we thrive. Together. I choked back a laugh, then tears, overwhelmed by the perfect encapsulation of our journey. You really know how to make a guy cry, I whispered. I know you, he replied simply. That evening, as the sun set over the city, we walked along the riverside, our reflections mingling with the golden glow of the water. Sam stopped, turning to face me fully. His hands cupped my face, and I leaned into him instinctively. Eli, he said, voice trembling just slightly, I can't promise the world will always be kind, but I can promise you this I will always be here. Every tear, every laugh, every quiet moment, I'll be with you. I nodded, feeling a profound sense of peace. And I'll be here too, I replied. No more hiding, no more fear. We kissed then, slowly, deliberately, a sealing of everything we had endured and everything we were willing to face. It wasn't dramatic or performative, just honest, tender, and infinitely significant. Afterward, we sat on a bench, watching the city lights shimmer in the water. I felt the weight of weeks, months, maybe even years lift from my shoulders. Our journey had begun in whispered notes, in small acts of kindness, in the courage to be seen. Now it had reached a moment of clarity. We belonged, not just to each other, but in the world we had feared. Over the next few months, our lives slowly integrated with a world that was sometimes skeptical, sometimes indifferent, but always watchful. We faced minor prejudices, curious glances, and occasional harsh words. But each challenge only strengthened the bond between us, teaching patience, resilience, and the profound power of commitment. Our families and close friends gradually came to understand, some with hesitation, some with full-hearted acceptance. Each small victory felt monumental invites to gatherings, casual hand-holding in public, shared laughter without fear. Sam and I learned that love didn't always need grand gestures. Sometimes, it thrived in the quiet victories of daily life. One evening, back at the coffee shop, we sat at our usual table, now familiar and comforting. Sam slid a tiny box across the table. "For you," he said. I opened it to find a delicate silver ring, simple and elegant. "It's beautiful," I whispered, tears threatening again. "It's not the ring," he said softly, taking my hand. "It's what it represents." Every step we took, every tear, every note, every act of courage all led here. To us, openly, fully, without fear. I nodded, overwhelmed by the journey we had traveled. "Yes," I said, "to us." We left the cafe that night hand in hand, walking beneath the amber glow of streetlights, hearts full, spirits lifted. The city seemed to embrace us, quiet and watchful, a witness to the simple, extraordinary act of two people choosing each other against the odds. And for the first time in a long time, I believed in tomorrow. Because love, I realized, wasn't about avoiding pain or judgment. It was about courage, vulnerability, and the quiet insistence that, even in a world that sometimes refused to understand, connection could flourish. Sam and I had survived our fears, embraced our truths, and discovered that happiness wasn't a destination, it was a choice, made every day, in small, intentional acts of care, trust, and devotion. As we walked along the riverside, the skyline glittering behind us, I looked at him, really looked, and smiled. "I never thought I could feel this safe, this scene," I said. "You are," he replied, brushing his thumb over my knuckles. "Always." And in that moment, everything felt right. The city, the rain-streaked streets, the cafe, the notes, the chocolates, the small gifts, they had all led to this. Two hearts, finally together, facing the world with quiet strength, courage, and the kind of love that could survive anything. We had crossed the bridge from solitude to intimacy, from fear to trust, from sorrow to joy. And as we walked, side by side, I knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next, we would face it together. For the first time, I didn't feel fragile. I felt invincible, because love had found us, and we had finally dared to meet it head-on. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.